the chain. What did you think, babe, in terms of what you saw yesterday?
I'm still processing my notes. I'm still looking through. I'm still taking some ideas and putting them into play, putting them into action in my life. So I am an expert, but I'm also a student. So I'm looking forward to being a student yet again today.
Yeah, well, you know what? You know what I was thinking about this morning, babe? I was thinking about why. I'm not saying that this is not true for everyone, of course, but I know a lot of single Black people. I know a lot of single people that are looking for looking for love. Look, if you ask them, what are you looking for? I'm looking for the right person. Things like that. And and I really think that there's something to that, in the sense that I don't know if that's as normal as we think. To sort of have the dating round robins kind of happening with people in their 20s and 30s and stuff like that, that claim to be looking for something permanent, but but things just kind of don't work out. And in my 30s, I'll tell people a little secret. I got to where I could see patterns. I would talk to my friends about their relationships, and the pattern would usually be, oh, I met this new person. This new guy, he's amazing. He's wonderful. It's great. And then you won't hear from the person for maybe about 3 or 4 months, because they're off, having sex and stuff with this great new person they met. And then about 7 months in, 8 months in, when all the dopamine wears off, you start getting to the point where it's like, so how's it going? Oh gosh, I can't stand this and I can't tolerate that, and this is driving me crazy, and I refuse, and then the thing ends, and then you start the cycle again next year. And in fact, there's actually a thing called cuffing season. Have you ever heard of cuffing season, babe?
Is that when like it gets cold outside and you need somebody to cuddle with?
Yeah.
Season?
Yeah. I feel like, don't get me wrong, I probably sound like a judgy old dude when I say this, but I'm sure Dr. Fauci would call cuffing season like a super spreader event. Like, that's not, like this idea that every year when it gets cold, I'm gonna find a new person to cuff with, and it ain't just cuffing. It's a whole lot of, you take the word cuff and reverse it, spell it backward, and you get another word that might describe what's going on in cuffing season. And I really just don't know if it's almost like that movie Groundhog Day, where you kind of have the same process over and over again. And I kind of would love to help people get out of that relationship purgatory. And I think that's why I think listening to the experts can be so beneficial. What are your thoughts?
Well, I kind of talked about that yesterday. Did you hear my keynote yesterday?
Yes, I did.
Talked about the realistic expectations in relationships, and the fact that when things get tough, people want to just escape and just go back to their safety zone instead of stretching and growing. So sometimes when people, they just have this idealistic view about what relationships are going to be, and then when it gets tough, they want to bail. And I think that sometimes that might be a moment where you can really get to know somebody who's different than you. So it may not necessarily be like, the right set of expectations. I don't know who these couples that you're seeing, but I'm thinking like right now, we've been in a pandemic for, oh gosh, a year now. And I think it's even more tough now, because how are you going to meet people? You're sheltering in place. You can't even get out. Travel is limited. You can't even see people that you may like, because half your face is covered up. It's like you can't. I don't know if someone's smiling at me or growling at me or anything. This is like added problems. And if imagine you're a single person and you live alone. Like, we have a whole household full of people, so we're never lonely, are we, Boyce?
No, I became less alone in the pandemic. Suddenly, that peace that I got every day when everybody would leave the house to go to school or go to work, all that peace was completely disrupted, and they all came into my habitat, which took some
in your habitat.
Fortunately, we don't have, our house is big enough where we're able to get our own little corners and cubbies of the house. But that takes a lot of work. That was our challenge, was figuring out, okay, how do we get along when we're all in that same space all day long? I mean, I love every single person in this house immensely, but man, this really tests you a little bit.
I think you're just insatiable, Boyce. Like, I can't get enough of you, but I think I kind of got enough of you. That was a nice thing to say. I was like, all right.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think that, when you're talking about this, I would just say this. Today one of our topics is, it's horrifically titled, and I picked the title is "Relationship Gurus Who Will Probably Die Alone," and people knew I was kind of, and I felt like it was a little bit direct, in the sense of kind of saying like, I think but it's just I had to be honest on it in the sense that I think that all advice you take on your life has to be taken with a grain of salt. That's it. It has to be taken to a grain of salt with a grain of salt. If you got somebody on the internet who has no licenses, no credentials, and you've never checked those credentials to see if their advice is going to actually work, and they're giving you advice on something as important as your life, then when your life doesn't go well, you have to take accountability for some of that. And we're seeing a lot of chickens coming home to roost in a lot of people's lives in a very public way. And I'm a believer in things like, accountability and be trying to be thoughtful about your next step. And I think that sometimes we fall into this false idea. This goes with the victim mentality, this false idea that whatever happens in your life, it just happened, right? You just had bad luck. God didn't bless you enough. White supremacy came, the boogeyman of white supremacy came and got you. Even though white supremacy did not pick your girlfriend or your boyfriends along the way or whatever. And I personally encourage everybody in here to take an empowered approach to kind of say, look, if I want to get the life I want, I've got to go and learn how to do that. Like I'll tell you what, when I was trying to figure out how to find the right woman and how to maintain a connection with the right woman, I read a book about women. At 31 years old, I read the whole book. It's called What Women Want Men to Know. And I did that because I said, I do not understand women. This is frustrating me in certain areas. I can't figure this out. And so I need to know what's going on inside the mind of a woman. And I read this whole book and it was great. It helped me understand, the women in my life better, daughter, mother, sister, women, etc. And I still chose not to get married for a little bit, but at least it was more deliberate, more intentional. Like I really, when things would happen, I wouldn't be like, well, why in the hell would she think that? Like, why would like that's what people do. You get these bitch fests, these forums where you can go and complain about the other gender, but maybe instead of complaining, it's like, again, but then again, maybe it was unique for me because I'm a mathematician. When you get a math problem, you don't complain about the problem, you solve the problem. Right. So rather than me just complaining about, because I think both genders really frustrate each other. I think men frustrate women, women frustrate men because we don't understand. It's like, why would you think that? So by learning how women think and understanding just the psyche of a woman, and by the way, understanding how different their brain is from mine, it allowed me to kind of sit back and not judge, but to just seek to understand and accept and say, okay, well, you know what? Some women do that. It may not even be gender specific. It's most of what defines a personality is the person itself. But gender is huge. Gender is a huge systematic factor that can divide people and lead to those misunderstandings that can destroy relationships. What do you think, babe?
Well, I think we are in an information age. You have the window to the world in your hand, in your pocket. So anything that you're interested in learning and trying to discover, you could Google it, you could look it up. I think what some of the challenges might be is that there's so much noise out there. It's like, how do you tease through all the noise? So you really do need to come to forums like this. We can have what I would consider for sure bona fide experts in a lot of different areas, and you can hear what they're saying, and they can kind of help you get through some of the noise on the internet. So you're right. I mean, it was really nice of you to read a book about women and to understand how women operate. But at the same time, you can reflect on what you want, Boyce. You had a mama in the house and a sister, and so there's other people that you can talk to, and you can also talk to professionals. I'm going back to the pandemic because I'm just overwhelmed at how the demand for therapy and for counseling and for some help is starting to become less stigmatized and more normalized, which is very important. And I'm glad that more modern ways of thinking about getting help with your relationship is starting to tease out in this way, because traditionally it was, the thinking was, okay, this is our problem together and we're not going to tell our family secrets. And what I'm now discovering is that many people are discovering or thinking that they need some outside help, and they're starting to understand that that sometimes we need help teasing out what's going on in these relationships.
Well, what I would be curious to know is, during the pandemic, if you measure the number of people that were infected with the virus, and I wonder how that number would compare to the number of people who were infected with depression. I've seen it so much. And does anybody else, give me a yes in the chat, yes or no? Do you know somebody who has suffered severe, mental, psychological effects from the isolation and being stuck at home? Maybe if you have kids, I don't know if anybody's got kids. Every single person I know that's got a teenager is talking about their child and how they felt just being having our 17-year-old, we're celebrating his birthday today. And, his whole senior year was just taken away from him. I mean, it's terrible. And I think about how much happened in my life in my senior year, and I can't imagine having all that be erased because somebody told me I had to stay in the house all the time, all day. And that doesn't, and I didn't even mention, the economic viruses that people were infected with, from job loss and loss of wealth, things like that. So and I'd be curious, maybe you could speak on that a little bit more, babe, what you've seen as a therapist in terms of, because I remember the demand for people like you, everybody it's ST Brown who's coming in here today. Every single therapist I know said that they were overbooked during the pandemic. And that's tragic to me.
Yeah, we are overbooked. And a lot of children they're going from their bed to the computer, and then from the computer, some of them just play video games, or they're just on Snapchat, or they're just on social media, and that's it. They don't have anything else. They have no social outlet. I'm really worried about what the health effect is going to be. Like, I'm trying to get the kids out of the house so that we can go running and do some exercise. They're not doing any sort of exercise. I know in my private practice, the month of July last year and the month of February was our record-breaking appointments. And for the first time in the whole history of the agency, they have a waiting list, because I just can't take anymore. I can't take any more people, because my own mental health is affected. It's just so much I take on, so much. I take on so much of people's, to really be effective, you have to really get in there and really tune everything else out and really hold on to a lot of those problems. It's becoming an issue. Even I've had some teenagers who are just afraid to turn the camera on in Zoom. They're afraid to say here, they call people's names. They're just afraid to say here, to acknowledge or to say anything, because it's just they're just worried. All of the worry and all of the anxiety that I'm seeing among these children, I think it would be years before we're able to come back from not just a pandemic, but from the psychological pandemic we're all in.
Yeah, but they're gonna be writing research papers about the pandemic for decades, and because it takes time to collect all that data. So it'll be 5 years from now, someone will do these groundbreaking studies on all the things that happened during the pandemic that we're not even aware of, not even talking about, because we don't know. And I really think, and you're right though, it's funny, when you talk about that weight that put on you as a therapist. So you'll get up in the morning, Alicia will get up in the morning and go and have 5 or 6 appointments in a row. And then she comes back and I'll think to myself, okay, I know I need to be her therapist. Like who's the therapist for the therapist? So I'm not a good therapist. I don't know exactly what a therapist does, but I notice y'all getting paid money to listen. So we'll go running, and Alicia will have a lot to say, and I just be like, okay, boys, just listen. That's your job. And because I'll tell you, it's a burden on everybody, and I would say that I cannot imagine. I mean, we're in a relationship during the pandemic, but a lot of people, were single on the dating scene. And when you go out in your dating in general, you've already got other variables to deal with. Just, is this person a serial killer? Are they going to steal my money? Do they have a disease? You know, like you have to think about these things. I mean, seriously, like with especially online dating, you hear the stories or whatever, and then on top of that, you're like, oh, by the way, there's this thing called the coronavirus, and it seems like it's overwhelming, you know. And I really think that so if you want to know the goal of today, and Dr. Leisha, I'll allow you to kind of express your own personal objective for what you think will happen today. The goal of today is to basically connect the experts in your community who have, you know, skill, licenses, scientific training that can help you solve the critical problems in your life. And I reiterate that this is not just about romantic stuff. This is not just about hooking up and, you know, or getting married per se. This is about just getting along with people. I see conflicts occur all the time. A lot of you all see conflicts that maybe happen in public on social media, things like that. And a lot of those conflicts could have been avoided by people just picking up the phone and calling each other, but they're afraid to do that. Right. So it's like, it's easier for me to fight you than it is for me to try to understand you. And what happens is that, remember that, you know, the Black Business School, we Black wealth is our centerpiece. But what we figured out was that part of the reason that Black wealth can't thrive is because you struggle with Black health and with Black relationships, psychological health, physical health, relationships among siblings, families. I'll say to people, hey, why don't you form an investment club? They'll say, because my relatives are terrible people, right? or I hate my spouse, or my brother and I ain't talked in 5 years. You know, so those things are really important because, you know, I can tell you, when I think about people that I work with that have helped in terms of what us achieving certain economic goals. I think about great people like Julian Gordon, who's our real estate dean. I think about Lamar Tyler over at Traffic Sales and Profit. I think about a few others that I've met throughout the years. And one of the things that I noticed is that part of the reason, or Vicky Dillard, for example, I think about the thing that all those people have in common is that somebody taught them how to manage relationships. Somebody taught them how to resolve disputes. When every single one of those people, I kid you not, impressed me. I can throw Al Duncan in there too. Al Duncan, he works with us as well. All those people, the one thing that they all have in common, besides the fact that they're all Black and they love Black people and they're really smart, is that all of them just have a way of carrying themselves that is conducive to the building of healthy relationships. They approach you with a positive gait. They are as helpful to you as they can possibly be. If you have a disagreement over something, they'll call you on the phone and say, I'd like to clear up this misunderstanding. They react to things in just such a unique way. You remember we met Julian that day when we were in New York in 2017 in Brooklyn. We were shooting the movie, The Black Love Blueprint, which was a great movie, by the way. You can go to theblackloveblueprint.com if you want to take a look at the film and look at the whole Love and Money curriculum, theblackloveblueprint.com. That's the URL. Well, anyway, Julian was introduced to us by George James. And we met, and Julian said, hey, I'd like to pitch something to you. Can I give you a ride to the airport? And when we met Julian that morning, he knew what kind of coffee we liked and came with the coffee. And I was like, oh, this is great. Like a cup of coffee. It doesn't cost much, but it made a big difference. It's like, oh, thank you. I was going to get coffee. Now I don't have to stand in line. And so we get in this car. And what happened was that because he approached in such a positive way, it made us more open to like, okay, let's hear what he has to say, and that opened the door to us working together, which created all kinds of great opportunities across the board for everybody. I know Julian's business has taken off, and we really love working with him, and it's like, think about this, right? None of that would have worked if either one of us had just been big assholes. You know, really. I mean, think about this. This is just me keeping it raw with you guys. If either one of us was just some arrogant jerk who just disrespected people and didn't know how to treat people, it wouldn't have happened. So all that wealth would have been lost if we couldn't find a way to work together. If I could not connect with my brother. So when I talk about Black love, I ain't just talking about sex and dating and marriage. Man, we're talking about Black people learning how to just get along. You know, like Rodney King said, can't we all just get along? So what do you think, man? Go ahead. Please. I've said enough.
Yeah, well, you're speaking to the fact that having a positive attitude can take you very far. Some people wonder why does nothing ever work out for me? And then you have other people's like, well, a lot of things work out for me. What's going on with you? And part of it could just be a positive attitude. Another part of it could be, when you're an expert in something, you need to hone in on your craft. You need to stay updated, and you need to get the knowledge and the information, so that you can become a knowledgeable person. So the positive attitude, knowing your craft very well, being very astute with what you're in your study, and also is that if you have issues with paranoia, if you have issues, mental health issues, get that fixed. It's not, I mean, it will get in the way, and I'm on the other end of that when I hear people mess up really good opportunities, and they're coming, to me, and I'm just thinking, okay, so you drew that conclusion based on that information, and it can be a little kind of distorted sometimes. And so it's important to have checks and balances. It's also important to have a good support system, because sometimes you can just get foggy and you can lose sight. You can lose sight of what's important, and you can just say stuff from the gut out your mouth, and you end up regretting it. So, that's something I would say to that. Like, have a good support system, someone that will keep you grounded, someone that will say, slow it down. That's not what's happening here. How about you call them and ask them, is that really what they meant by that text message? So texting and, sending messages on Facebook, that's not really talking. So much gets lost in translation. I try to use as many emojis as possible, but even at that point, you don't know how someone's feeling on the other end.
Well, they say that I want to say 70-80% of all communication is nonverbal. So if you're sending a text or an email, you're gonna get just a small percentage of what the person is actually trying to say. And also, I will just tell you, I think that we need to start off. Today's Sunday, so we're gonna have church for a minute, and I need everybody to come to the altar. Pastor, the good Reverend Dr. Boyce Watkins would like to ask all of y'all, in the name of Black love and Black progress, to consider doing this one thing for me. I need everybody, and I'll be the first one. I'm not going to ask you to do something I'm not going to do myself. I need everybody to go ahead and confess right now in public that you have a mental health issue that needs to be addressed, that you have something psychologically that is holding you back, that's keeping you from building good relationships, that's keeping you from getting the wealth you deserve, or keeping you from achieving a certain goal. And I need you to go ahead and just type me or I or yes or anything in the chat to go ahead and make that confession. I'm going to be the first one to confess. Again, I'm not in any way trying to get on nobody's pedestal. Lord knows I can think of 2 or 3 things that I know about myself that has kept me from being my best self, and it's frustrating. It pisses you off. It comes from, maybe comes from childhood. I can think about the way, for example, my interactions with women were heavily affected by something terribly embarrassing that happened in the 8th grade, where there's this little girl named Wayne that wasn't even pretty. She was ugly, but my friend said, "Why don't you ask Waynette to the 8th grade dance?" And I said, "No, I can't ask her." I was real shy. I didn't know how to talk to girls. Nobody ever taught me how to talk to girls. Girls would make me nervous. My hands would sweat. I was real, it was almost embarrassing to talk about this. And he said, "Come on, ask her." I was like, "No." He said, "I'll ask her for you." And I was like, "No, don't do that. Don't do it." Right. So the crowded cafeteria full of kids. I'm 8th grade, right? Very impressionable. And I hate that I've never told this story before. My God, what is wrong with you boys? And I'm talking about myself in the 3rd person, right? Which right there, that's probably another mental health issue we got to address. So this kid gets up, who's supposed to be my friend, and he goes over to this girl, and I don't know what he said, but he whispers something in her ear. I think he said, "Hey, would you like to go to the school dance with Boyce?" And she gets up and screams at the top of her lungs, "Hell no!" And do you know that just crushed my soul? Like, that literally, I mean, I was so, and it's funny, nobody knew what she was saying hell no to. Nobody knew what was going on. Everybody thought it was weird. Everybody looked. I'm talking about like probably 400 kids in the cafeteria, right? And it was public school, so they crushed us all in there. And you know what it did? And the therapists in here that are watching, I see Dr. Daphne King and Kivana, and the therapist in here could probably explain this better, but what it did was it confirmed my pre-existing false belief that I was unattractive, undesirable, and unlovable, and that and that nobody could ever really love me and want to be with me for, and that's terrible. Like I carried that, right? I had to work through that as I got older. And that's a terrible thing to carry. So here's my point. Let me just stop talking because we're getting too deep right now. But I think everybody has that cross to bear, right? Everybody's got, and it's sometimes it's a completely imaginary cross, and so the reason that we brought these experts here today, and everybody who's watching online, the feed will not be public for forever. So where you can go to the blackloveweekend.com, theblackloveweekend.com. It's totally free. You can come in and join us. Like, it doesn't cost you anything. And I believe that every Black person I know could benefit from the help of a therapist. And these are professionals that know what the hell they're doing. They are very well trained. They have licenses and credentials and everything else. And maybe the rest of the world is going to go listen to people that they find on the internet who just say things that sound good. But I want you to hear from people that can actually help you with your mental health. Okay, so the URL is theblackloveweekend.com, and you can come on in if you're watching online. And there we go. So you ready?
Thank you for disclosing, Boyce. Thank you for disclosing that.
Yeah, that was a hard story to tell. I kid you not. I was sitting there like, Boyce, what are you? I was literally looking at myself from the outside in, kind of saying like, Boyce, why are you even telling this story? Because I didn't think this morning I wasn't thinking to tell this story, but it was like it just came to me in terms of the things that happen when we're kids that just aren't right, that just are so unfair that you carry with you. And I know many of you probably, in here maybe suffered abuse, and we were talking all week about DMX and what abuse did to him and his sister Roxanne Shante and all this other stuff. And I just personally think, number one, we got to break those cycles, right? We have to be sensitive to what kids are feeling and help them through that. But then two, you have an inner child that also deserves to be loved. You have an inner child that maybe needs to be cradled and nurtured and told that he or she is okay, so that you can go become a healthy, strong adult that you're meant to be. Because in order for me to become a better man, I had to deal with that inner child. I to this day, I still have to go talk to him and say, it's okay, Boyce. Like, you are worthy. You are good enough. Right. So I want everybody to just kind of, I hope you enjoy the day. I'm going to introduce Tia. Do you want to introduce Tia, babe?
You can introduce Tia. I have to step away for a second, but I'll be back.
Okay. Everyone. All right, babe. So the person that is going to okay, wait. Okay, don't. Okay. So Tia's not in yet. So Terrence tells me that Tia's not in yet. So what we'll do is, actually, if you want to, until we get started, I can actually take some questions. If you want to put the questions in the Q&A section or comments, things like that, I can answer some questions while we wait to get started. So let's see here. Janet says, my father has stage 4 prostate cancer, congenital heart disease. Oh, I'm so sorry. Diabetes, and my stepmother refuses to get a COVID shot. This woman has informed me that I'm not allowed to ask any questions about my dad's health. She is extremely verbally abusive and disrespectful to his daughters. What do I do? Ooh, that's tough. It sounds like some intervention is necessary. I'm thinking two things. I'm thinking lawyer or therapist, somebody that, because I know a lot of us have family drama that is just unimaginable. And I'd be curious to know what your father has to say about that. And I'm very sorry to hear you have to go through that. I can't really say specifically exactly how to deal with that. But I definitely think some outside intervention will be necessary for that. I wouldn't just try to just bulldoze your way into that, because I've seen that. I've seen where a child is, trying to deal with a step parent who doesn't, who isn't on the same agenda as the rest of the family, and it becomes kind of messy. And that's actually one of the other benefits, I think, of, kind of talking to good people that can help you with things like this is, I personally, maybe I'm just old fashioned or unrealistic, but I don't really think that it's natural for us to have so many families that are not complete. I mean, when you first get together with somebody and you have a baby or whatever, your vision is a 2-parent household, right? Marriage, or maybe not marriage, but just something that brings the family together, some sort of institution. And children lean on that. Like, children look to, people, children look to the adults around them to provide that stability that they need in order to feel complete in the world. And when that stability is not there, I really encourage you to think about how this affects kids. I know that we live in a world where it's all about me, and I, and what I want, and what's going to make me happy. And I'm just going to say that I didn't grow up in a household like that, for sure. I did not, that wasn't my experience. And I remember my parents, their view was kind of like, my happiness matters, but the family's happiness also matters. And my father, who was a young 20, I remember my dad's 22nd, 23rd birthday. Like, that's how young my parents were. And he could have been out being a player. He could have been out living his best life. He could have been out meeting all kinds of women and living it up. But instead, he chose to come home to us every day. And then when I got older, when I got in my 20s and 30s, I said that was a hell of a sacrifice, because I know people that are 32 years old, men that are 32, who have lots of money and whatever. And people tell them, like, well, why would you settle down? Why don't you just go play the field and have fun and all this other stuff? And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm not judging that. But I think that there's more to the conversation that needs to be had. I think that there's more to say, do you have any form of accountability to others? Do you care about other people at all? Or is it all about pleasure-seeking behavior for just you and yourself for your entire life? I would say that just because you have the freedom to just run around and do whatever you want, that may not always be the best option for you. And also, but here's another important thing that I can tell you. And actually, Taryn, if Tia's not here yet, what I'm going to do actually is I can go ahead and start this panel, because I don't want our panelists to have to wait too long. But I will say this too, as a professional, when there's a point where you want to grow up and do grown-up things and big boy things, there is something that people notice when you don't have that stability. When you are, like, for example, a lot of churches won't allow some young single guy to be the pastor of the church, because they know that there's too much temptation. There are all these women in the congregation that look up to the pastor, and we know what that can lead to. That can lead to pimps in the pulpit and everything else. And so I would encourage everyone to kind of sort of have that sort of line of thinking that is independent, where you don't get caught up in this want to be a player narrative that is fed to you through media for men, and then also for women, that independent, that super independent, hyper, I don't need no man kind of mindset of extreme feminism, because that can also come off as a type of selfishness, honestly. I can tell you this, when people use that word submit, and they say, well, would you submit to your man? I hear a lot of women say, hell no, you submit to a man, what's wrong with you? but then here's the thing. Alicia and I submit to each other. I know that, and a lot of people that are in relationships can testify to this. You submit to each other. And so what happens is that when she submits to me, I'm sure there's some feminists that would say, oh girl, I would never submit to that. I would never allow that. You got to raise your standards, right? But then what I get when I submit to her is, oh Boyce, you simping. Why are you simping for that woman or whatever? I'm like, I'm her man, not her pimp. I'm not supposed to. What do you want me to do? Slap her every time she says something that I don't agree with? And so what I would say to you is that when I watch my parents, through the years, kind of grow up with each other, and 46 years of marriage, there's a lot of stuff you pick up from watching that is not going to be shared with you by any guru who's telling you to just do whatever feels good. There's a lot of stuff you see from watching a 46-year marriage that you're not going to read in a book. Single people, you got a lot of single people giving relationship advice about how to stay married and how to be married and all that. I don't know if those are the best people to do that. In fact, I will say that I watched for many years, and I'm going to say this, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce Tia, because it looks like Tia's in. I would say that when you're talking about submission, I watched my mother and my father submit to each other every single day. I remember my mother my father would get loud and kind of do stuff that would probably honestly be defined as toxic masculinity. And my mother would just kind of just go on about her business because she knew deep down my daddy was a teddy bear. You know, yeah, he's this crazy, angry Vietnam vet, and he's a police officer who likes to have control and authority. But she knew how to connect with it. She knew how to settle the beast within him. She had that Felicia Rashad kind of finesse where she knew how to get inside his soul and calm him down. And then, you know, like King Kong talking to the little white girl or something. I don't know. But then you have then you on the flip side, I specifically remember my mother doing things or saying things or getting mad about things where I'd be like, what's going on with mama? And daddy would say, well, you know that's what your mama wants. So we're going to do that. Let's do what your mama, make your mama happy. It's, that kind of thing, that submission, right? So I'm not telling you what to do, but I will say this before, and I'm going to introduce Tia now. I don't really think, again, this is my view. I want the experts to chime in on this. I don't really think you can expect to have healthy relationships with anyone if you can't humble yourself. If you bring all this ego and, this like meanish, this selfishness and this self-absorbed, egomaniacal kind of persona to a relationship, I don't think it's going to work unless you're somehow lucky enough to find somebody who will allow you to just dominate them, which that's a whole nother conversation. It's up to you. All right. So let me go ahead and read Tia's bio. I see Tia's in there. And Tia, let me tell you, Tia and I have been friends for, what year is this? 14 years. I met Tia on the set of a movie in 2007. And I remember that day very well. And she was out of New York at that time. And Tia is a person that, and I'll say it's just personally, she, you guys don't know this, she'll probably never tell you, but she was a big power broker. She was with Ebony Magazine for many years. She picked the covers. Anybody remember that cover of Ebony when Bill Cosby was going down, and you had the picture of the Cosby Show family, and the glass was shattered on the family picture? See, Tia's laughing because she I don't know, she knows I remember all that. But yeah, Tia was the creative genius that picked that image, and everybody talked about it. And then I want to talk about that interview you had with DMX. You remember that? Yeah, everybody talked about that too. But DMX, rest his soul. He just passed, so I'm not gonna touch it. But if you want to just know about that, look it up. Just look it up. It was a crazy interview. And so I'm gonna read a little bit of her bio to you, and then I'm gonna hand the mic over and be quiet. It says Tia Brown is a licensed therapist, educated at Columbia University, by the way. Tia Brown is a licensed therapist and lifestyle expert who uses solutions-based therapy to help individuals develop practical life skills and treatment plans to enhance their quality of life. After spending more than a decade addressing issues ranging from relationship and mental health stressors to budgeting and personal finance woes, Tia knows what helps clients develop the skills needed to make healthy choices and improve their overall quality of life, mentally, financially, and exponentially. So without further ado, I welcome Miss Tia Brown. How you doing today, Tia?
I'm doing well. Thank you for that introduction, Boyce. It's always hilarious to hear people talk about some of the stuff you did. And I am shocked that you remember that cover.
Oh, I remember a lot of stuff. I mean, Tia is amazing. So I'm gonna just shut up because if I keep talking, I'm gonna be talking all day. It's not my time to talk. So, and by the way, Taryn, if Tia needs extra time for the panel, go ahead and give her the time. She can take all the time she needs. And so have a good day, and I'm gonna bounce on out.
Awesome so much, and thank you so much for having me, Boyce. And I thank everyone who's joining us today. I am so excited to talk about today's topic, like reigniting the fire. How do we bring passion back to our relationships? As Boyce shared, I am extremely passionate about Black people, Black families, Black couples. And, I've really made it a big part of my life's work to help impart life skills, to talk about our trauma experiences, and to figure out ways that we can live better as a community. And that makes me super excited to talk to you guys today, but also to have our panelists, because we have some dynamic folks on the panel. I'm just gonna go down the list. We have Dr. Daphne King, who's a mental health specialist, a mental health therapist. We have Hassani and Danielle Pettiford, who are the founders of the Couples Academy, a place that's all about giving life skills, practical tips, counseling and therapy to couples and individuals. And we have Kavana and Mixon, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist. So I just want to reiterate that one of the biggest purposes of this weekend is to give skills, but from a culturally competent perspective, right? A lot of times we talk about therapy, and Boyce talked about me going to Columbia. Yes, I went to Columbia. I went to NYU. I also went to Howard University. I am a Black woman, and I very much know that it's important for us to not just talk about things from the perspective of mental health, but culturally competent mental health. So today for the panel, we're going to make sure that we are integrating things in a way that's specifically applicable for our community. We're going to leave space at the end for people to ask questions, to share their thoughts, to share experiences. And, as always, we say, take what you like and leave the rest. You'll hear tips from different perspectives. If it's something that resonates with you, we want you to use that information. If it's something that you think can be helpful, we want you to write it down and figure out how to implement it into your life. If you want to have a more impactful encounter with any of the relationships, pros, therapists, experts, make sure you take the information, because they all offer services that can be life-changing.